One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode.
Y'all, I'm so excited to talk to you about today's topic because you really do learn stuff better when you teach it. And I have to say, I have not understood SEO and keywords very well in the online space. And I've been trying to figure it out for actually a few years. I would be part of conversations where people start talking about SEO and keywords, and I would just kind of nod along and pretend like I knew what everyone was talking about instead of raising my hand and saying, can you explain that to me? Because I don't really get it. I kind of get it, but I don't. So if that has been you, if you have no idea what SEO is, which is search engine optimization, and when I say the word keyword, your eyes kind of cross and you're looking at me a little funny, then this episode is for you, because I've been in your shoes and I've been to the point where my head is about to explode and I can't take any more information in, because somebody's talking to me and all I can think is, I got to remember to Google that later because I have no idea what they're talking about. So if that has been you in the past, then today's episode is for you, because we are going to talk about SEO for podcasts.
Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? Have you been wanting to start a podcast? You've been thinking about it. It feels right. You just know this is the next thing that my business needs. Well, I encourage you to sign up for my 5-day podcast bootcamp. This is a thing that you have been looking for. It is a 5-day video series where I walk you through exactly how to start, launch, and market your podcast, and I throw in some more information about planning strategies and being consistent and how you can make the most out of your podcast from day one. So sign up for our 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp at crystalprofit.com/podcast bootcamp. And do it already. You know that you've been wanting to, so just bite the bullet and join us.
So, like I said in the beginning, I've been trying to figure out keywords for a long time, unsuccessfully. And it wasn't until this year that I finally got a glimpse of how the whole search engine and keywords and just really doing your research ahead of time on creating content, how it all works together. Because it really is like this big content creating machine that I just pretended for a long time to understand. And I really should have been asking more questions instead of just saying, oh yeah, I get that. That makes sense to me, which is what I did for a long time. If that is you, right now, I want you to send me a message and say, I was confused about like keywords and trying to understand how they worked for so long. But I also want you to message me and say, hey, you totally cleared up that question for me. If you still have questions, send them to me. And if I don't know the answer, I will find it for you. This is actually one of my superpowers is being able to find answers to questions. But I really wanted to kind of take you on my journey of being in the online space because if you've been listening for a while, you know that I tried blogging for several years and I never really got any traction on it. Number one, because I wasn't consistent. I wasn't really committed to doing it. Two, I wasn't very clear. I talked about many different things, random times, and there was no actual plan to anything that I did. But the biggest mistake for me was nodding my head in conversations and just pretending like I knew what was going on instead of actually stepping up and saying, hey, I really don't get this. Can you explain? Like, tell me more. Explain more because I just don't get this. And that's been my biggest downfall with keywords and SEO. So SEO is search engine optimization, and it is basically how your content gets found on Google. And it wasn't until probably 4 or 5 months ago that I realized that the more specific, the more targeted, the more niche that your information, whatever it is, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube video, a blog post, whatever content that you're creating, the more specific that you can be about what it is that you're creating when you put it out into the world. And by specific, I'm talking about titles and descriptions that you use to describe whatever you're putting out. And we could totally go down a rabbit hole of all the ways that you can optimize something for SEO. I won't go there because I don't want your heads to explode, especially if you are struggling to understand the basics of keywords and SEO. So I just want you to understand the big picture is you should be creating content around what people are already searching for. Unless you have a podcast that is about something no one has ever talked about in the history of time, then you should be creating content around stuff people are already searching for. because there's a good possibility. I mean, how long has Google been around now? So I'm from the generation of AOL chat rooms, right? Like dial-up internet. I remember a time before the internet was a thing, okay? Like if you're listening to this, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Google AOL chat rooms and you'll see, if that bird like the startup dial-up doesn't just kind of make you cringe a little bit because you're going to have to wait for like, then maybe we can't be best friends. But I'm just saying, like, I don't have anything against you if you're younger and you don't get it, but you older people, you get it. You know what I'm saying. Like you know that Google has been around for a long time. And now there are millions, like I don't even know, trillions, billions, quadrillion. I don't even know how many pieces of content are actually out in the interwebs that Google crawls and looks through every single day. The reason why I say that is because if you put up a piece of content that just has the word podcast in it, let's just say you name a podcast and you put out the word podcast. That's what it's called. That is probably the most generic description ever, and it's going to fall to the very bottom of Google every single time because it's not specific. It's not specific enough. Now, if I were to title something like this podcast episode, it's SEO for podcasts, what you need to know. That is the title of this episode. And the reason why I did that is because this isn't SEO for websites. This isn't SEO for YouTube. This is SEO for podcast. This episode is specific to SEO for podcast. And the reason why I titled it this way is because people are searching for this. I'm going to give you some tools and strategies that I use, but I just really want you to understand the basic big picture of how SEO can work for your podcast, because there are people searching for exactly what you're creating. There are people out in the world. I don't care if you think it's the most random thought ever. Someone out there is looking for it. I'm trying to remember. There was some really obscure, what was it for? It was about like raising miniature pygmy goats or something. Or it's like how to groom miniature pygmy goats. It was something that, you would think, okay, there's probably like 5 people, in my state that do that kind of stuff. But then if you look it up, there's probably thousands of people that do this kind of thing. But if you want your content to be found, you have to be as specific as possible. So that is the kind of general overview of where we're going, why I'm talking about this, and why it's important. I want you to understand the things that it took me years. Like I'm trying to give you the shortcut, right? Like that's the big thing here. As I'm trying to this is on a silver platter, SEO for a podcast. I'm trying to short track and fast track, however, it's shortcut and a fast track, right? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say here. But I'm trying to give you the tools to help you be successful from the beginning or from the middle, or to help get more eyes on the content that you're creating. Because I know y'all are working hard. I know it. I feel it whenever I get messages from y'all. You're frustrated with, I spent hours coming up with this content. I spent hours editing it and making it beautifully packaged. And, I just want it to be so gorgeous and put it out into the world, but no one's finding it. So I want to help you with that. So before we dive headfirst into SEO, I wanted to take a second to tell you all the information that you're learning here today can be applied to the 3 different types of podcast descriptions that we talked about in episode 89. So if you haven't listened to that episode, stay with me here first. Listen to everything that we're talking about SEO, but go back and listen to that so you know how you can apply SEO and keywords for all of those descriptions that we talked about in that episode. But are you ready? Are you ready to dive in? Keywords and SEO? I know. You're nodding and you look a little nervous. You're like, okay. Like you're rolling your eyes and you're saying, I guess if I don't have a choice, like let's do this. But you're right. You don't have a choice because I'm going to sit here and tell you that I waited way too long to understand this. And now that Google, this is the really fun part, Google is actually indexing podcast episodes. Y'all, this is huge. This is so phenomenally huge because in the past,
being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants. Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
your podcast would not show up on Google. This is brand new. As of this year, they just started indexing podcast episodes. So what if you created something and you wound up on the first page of Google with a brand new podcast? Holy, like that just blows my little tech-loving, like SEO, like, oh my God, like I geek out on all this stuff. Y'all know I'm super dorky. That's why y'all come to me, because you're like, I have no desire to figure all this stuff out. But Crystal probably has the answer, so I'm going to go see what kind of shenanigans she's up to, because she's kind of crazy and I can listen to her. So I know that's why you're here, right? Because you want to show up on the first page of Google. So listen up, because I'm going to teach you how you can by using these strategies. So again, SEO optimization. So what is SEO? It's search engine optimization. And basically the translation is how your information that you put out on the internet shows up in search engines. Now, you could create podcast content that ends up getting buried on the very back page of Google or other search engines, or, and this is where SEO really comes in, you could wind up on the very first page of Google. So how does this really work? And like I said, I want to stay really high level on all this, because I can totally lose you in all the nuances of all the different ways you can optimize your content. So I don't want something else, like another tech thing, freaking you out, because I know, you're probably freaked out about Audacity already and getting everything really set up. So I'm just going to suggest, like I have in previous episodes, that you install keywords everywhere. This is a tool that I use. It's a plugin that you can put directly on your computer. And once it's installed, it is 100% free. Let me just 100% free. Y'all know I'm cheap around here. So 100% free. I'm going to say it again. But it's going to show you how many people are searching for information every single day or on a monthly basis. That's really what they do, is they clump everything into a monthly basis. So for this podcast episode, I actually did a little research that I'm going to share with you later, but it is what helped me name this podcast today. So why is all of this important? I want you to create relevant content, right? You want to create something that you know your audience is going to get value from and they may already be searching for on the internet. So I want you to start doing keyword research for SEO as part of your content idea strategy, because the more content you create around ideas people are already searching for, the higher the probability that you're going to be found on Google. So I love doing that. Just the whole blows my mind. It still does. Y'all, like I said, I just recently really understood keywords and started using them to my benefit. And y'all, I'm showing up on lots of pages of Google because I'm utilizing these strategies that I'm teaching you here today. And y'all, like I said in the beginning, I've been blogging for a long time and I've learned SEO from many different teachers, but it really didn't click until a few months ago. So how do we use SEO? I use SEO in my titles that I create for the podcast. And then once I find the keywords that I know people are already searching for, I try to use those in my episode descriptions, which we've talked about episode descriptions in the last episode. Then I use them in my show notes. So I know some people are going to say, but I don't use show notes. I don't have a website. Well, this is why I encourage people to have websites, because the possibility, I was going to say possibility. We're just making up words. It's probability and possibility, just words smashed in together. So the possibility that you're going to show up in Google exponentially increases whenever you have awesome show notes that have relevant keywords around what your podcast is about. So for this episode, I did my outline like I do every single time, and you can go back, go to episode 89, go to those show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 89, and I actually show you what my show notes look like, and I make sure that I have the words that I am saying. So this episode is about SEO for podcast. I say that several times within my podcast episodes and in my show notes. So I'm going to tell y'all something really cool. I don't know when this is coming, but Google is already in the works of crawling audio. What does that mean? Okay. I knew this episode, just kind of, if you have to listen to it again to really understand some of the tech things, that's okay. But I just really want to get all of these ideas out here. But Google is starting to crawl a lot of the audio. That means they are listening to your podcast. If you have put them out on all these different platforms, they're listening to it, much like they would crawl like the text information that's on a blog post. They have artificial intelligence now that is starting to recognize when someone is speaking, well, what are they actually saying? So they're picking up on those words, those keywords that you're saying over and over again. If I say SEO for podcast several times within this episode, and someone searches Google for, how does SEO for podcast work? Maybe this episode will show up for them. And that is my hope. That is my dream. That is what the overall goal is in doing all of this stuff. So, and this goes back to content planning. When do you actually do SEO? I do this before I ever start recording. Whenever I sit down to do my outline, I know what the title is of my episode before I start recording. That way I make sure and say the keywords several times, which you want to do this in a very authentic way. If you've ever heard of keyword stuffing in blog post, that's basically where someone will say the same words over and over and over again within a blog post, hoping that it will show up in a search engine. But then you go to it and you're like, this has nothing to do with what that keyword is. They're just trying to get, their pages to rank in Google, which eventually, if you're not authentic, like y'all, these bots are so smart, and your blog page is going to eventually drop down to the bottom page because people aren't going to hang around, because that's not actually what your content is about. So I'm just like going off on all these tangents about people that they try to cheat all these systems and beat algorithms, and I'm just not about that, y'all. I'm just not. I think that if you work hard and you create content and deliver value to your audience, then it's going to pay off. I think that, having some smart strategies in your back pocket really helps, but don't try to beat the system. Don't try to keyword stuff your podcast or your show notes or your episode descriptions, because you're just going to turn people off that way. Don't do that. Be genuine, be authentic. So I told y'all I was going to tell you all the tools that I use. So I already mentioned Keywords Everywhere is the one that you can install if you use Google Chrome. That's what I use most often. So if I go to Google right now and I search for something, which is what I did for this podcast episode, I searched podcast episode show notes and SEO. That was actually my original idea. Like whenever I tell y'all to do content creation and planning, I just kind of write down, I should talk about show notes and SEO. But once I started digging a little deeper, I noticed no one searches for podcast episode show notes and SEO. So I got to change it up a little bit. I need to make it better. So what I found was there were between the sweet spot, if you're looking at keywords everywhere, it'll tell you how many people are searching for that term a month. And the sweet spot you want to go for is between 100 and 1,000 searches. Because if I just type in the word podcast in there, there's probably more than 50,000 searches for podcasts. Like, what is a podcast? Every single month. Well, I know I'm not going to rank on the first page of Google for what is a podcast when there's already 50,000 other people out there. It's just a lot harder. It's possible, but it's a lot harder to do that. But if I search for a term like podcast SEO or SEO for podcast, and it had right around 460 searches a month, I'm like, hey, that's 460 people that I could potentially reach with this podcast and answer their questions if they have some about SEO for podcast. So those are the tools that I use, or the keywords everywhere. That's how I use that. And then the other tool that I love so much, and like I said a second ago, if you don't have a website for your podcast, I'm working on a training that I'm going to have, I think at the end of November, the beginning of December, that's about how to build a website for your podcast. And it's going to have an extensive training on show notes because it's something that I know it's a lot of work. I hear y'all. I hear you when you say, Crystal, that looks like it's a lot of work. It is and it isn't. It is if you try to do everything in different stages and treat show notes all as like separate pieces of content. But if you think of it as one fluid piece of content, it really is a lot easier, and it gets so much better the more often you do it and the more systematic. Like if you put processes in place to make sure everything gets done, I promise you it's not that bad. But I use WordPress for my website. That is what I have used for the last, I've been using it for over a year now. I love it. I love how I can customize everything and make it my own. I do my own website. I know some of you don't have the bandwidth and you have no desire to create your own website. That's totally fine. But with WordPress, you can make it very custom. And so if you have someone that you're working with, I would recommend WordPress just because you have more flexibility when it comes to the SEO and how you can optimize all of your content. But the plugin that I use that helps me optimize all of my podcast episodes on my website is Yoast, YOAST. And I'm going to link to this in the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 90. It's crazy, y'all. I didn't even say that earlier. We're on episode 90. That's nuts. Anyway, but I use the Yoast SEO tool. And what this tool does is basically it is my second set of eyes. So I've created my show notes. Everything looks glorious. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to publish this thing. But then Yoast will tell me, oh, but Crystal, you haven't chosen the right long tail keyword. Like the title is great, but it's too long. Or you said you wanted to use this keyword, but it doesn't show up enough times. You need to put it in there more. So it has like this, it gives you like a red light if it's not good enough. It gives you an orange light if it's okay, and then it's a green light. That means you're good to go. That means your post, I call it a post because essentially it looks like a blog post, but it's my show notes. It means your post is long enough. It'll tell you if you have your keyword in there enough times, and it'll tell you if you have way too much text altogether. So you don't want your show notes to read. This is why I tell people not to do transcripts, because you'll end up with huge chunks of paragraphs where they're not spaced out correctly, or they're not grammatically correct, or they just don't look very professional. They don't look really well done. So I don't think that your show notes should only be your transcripts. That's not to say I'm doing a whole episode video series on transcripts because I just learned a whole bunch of really cool information. But for the Yoast SEO tool, it will tell you this is what you need to change. And again, it's 100% free. But if you have something that's besides a WordPress site, then message me, because I would actually like to know what you use or what you suggest, because I used Weebly in the past. I don't use them anymore, and I found it challenging because I didn't have a lot of opportunities to optimize for SEO for individual posts. I just kind of had to optimize my site for my initial, like crystalprofit.com, and I could pick a few keywords that I wanted to show up for, but other than that, I couldn't do it for each individual post, and that's why I was encouraged to switch to WordPress. I'm so glad I did. It is a learning curve, just like anything else, but if you want to have a website for your podcast, I suggest you go to WordPress, wordpress.org, not wordpress.com. That is a different, we've had conversations on the podcast about, should I have a website for my podcast? And wordpress.com isn't the best solution. It's an option, but I highly encourage people to use wordpress.org and find a theme out there in the online world that can help you build a website or hire somebody. If you can't do it, you have no desire to do it, then hire somebody to do it for you. But I hope I didn't just like stress you out and blow your mind about websites and all the things, because it can be overwhelming if you're not ready for it. But I have a feeling that a lot of you, even if you're not ready for it right now, you're going to come back and listen to this episode and say, okay, I'm ready to tackle SEO. So if this, like, you're listening to this right now and you're like, Crystal, I'm not quite there yet, then that's fine. Save this episode. Like, put a pin in it, come back to it later whenever you are ready. But I wanted to get this information out there because it held me back for so long, and I don't want that to happen to anybody else. I always want to share as much helpful information as I can with you. So let me do a quick recap. Today we talked about SEO for podcast, why it's important, the tools that I use, including Keywords Everywhere and Yoast if you're using WordPress. So if you have any questions about any of this, go to the show notes, send me a message, hit me up on Facebook, hit me up on Instagram, tell me I don't understand this, and I will be happy to walk you through my processes, and you can tell me if it makes more sense. I think I'm going to do a YouTube video on my planning content process from the SEO, the keyword search, and then setting up the SEO and doing like every single little step. But I try not to make the YouTube videos too focused on multiple things, right? Like I think I want to do something specifically for SEO for podcasts. So stay tuned. Maybe that is something you will see later this month or early in November. But that does it for this episode. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe and hear all the other fun things that we're going to talk about. Like I said, more SEO stuff and more website stuff. And yeah, there's going to be some cool trainings towards the end of the year that are going to be all about building a website for your podcast, because I feel like a lot of people get stuck and hung up in what they need, what they don't need. They feel like they need to spend a ton of money, and you don't. So I'm excited to bring y'all that training. But be sure to sign up for the free 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp and check out the other great resources we have in the resource library. Check out the show notes for this episode at crystalprofit.com/episode 90. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. And if you're listening to this and you've been here with us for a few episodes and you're really liking what you're hearing, I'd love for you to leave us a review. Tell me what your favorite episode has been. Tell me how this podcast has helped you, or tell me some of the other questions that you have. What other topics do you want to hear me talk about or address? Because I know y'all have them. I see y'all. I see the questions that come in the Facebook groups, and I'm curious to see how I can help you. How can I serve you? How can I add value to you and your podcast? Because I love the thought of the ripple effect. Let me help you create even more impact in someone else's life through your podcast and the information that you're giving to other people, because that lights my heart on fire, guys. Like, that gets me so excited to think that you are out there creating content that's going to encourage other people. It's going to motivate people. It's going to make somebody laugh. It's going to make somebody cry. It's going to make somebody feel empowered. Like, I just love the thought of other people creating content to help other people and to add value to their lives. So please reach out if you have any questions. But remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.
Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, "Send Crystal a text message." And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, "Send Crystal a text message." And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.